Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rob Nuttleman, employment attorney, public speaker, and mediator. Last time we talked about the importance of, understanding what our body is doing, what our body's reacting to that stress when we're going into a difficult conversation. We talked about choosing your words carefully, using I versus you statements, staying away from accusatory things. We also talked about the power of breathing and taking a pause and kind of getting right with ourselves before the conversation. We're going to move on to some other techniques and difficulties with conversations and ways to overcome those difficulties today. We're going to be talking about setting goals for ourselves before we go into the conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about doing some self audits and what is our motivation and what's our intentions. And we're also going to look at building on failure. How do we look at the past conversations, what went wrong, and how do we fix those? Has this ever happened to you? You have a conversation, or you're going to have a conversation with a coworker about something that they did wrong, and you're ready to go in there and you're ready to let them know exactly what happened and what you expect them to do and what's going to happen. When that happens, I want you to think about maybe taking a step back and consider what exactly is my goal in that conversation? Is my goal to get this off my chest? Is my goal to get the other person to agree with my perspective? Or is my goal to get them to do something in the way that I want them to do it? Or maybe the goal is, what is the best way to figure out how can we work at this goal together? What is the accomplishment? I think it's important to look at what are our goals in specific conversations so that we can come in with the right mindset. And I look at goals, there's all sorts of different goals and ways to look at it. Um, One is the outcome goal. What is the desired outcome? Do I want to resolve this conflict? Do I want to come up with clear guidelines on what somebody's supposed to do or not do? Maybe I have a relationship goal. I want to build on this relationship. I want to increase the relationship. I want to resolve any issues. I want to open up better communication. Or maybe I want to maybe have a process goal. How am I going to feel about this ultimately? How am I going to react? What is it that I want to? Knowing what those goals are going into the conversation is going to allow us, it's going to dictate to some extent what it is, how we're going to respond and how we're going to approach that conversation. So, when was the last time you entered into a conversation with very specific goals in mind? When you did that, was there a change? If you haven't done it, what do you think might happen? If I want to approach the conversation and my goal is to get an employee to do something specific, how I'm going to approach that's going to be different than if my goal is just to make sure I understand where that person's coming from or to develop a collaborative conversation. Identifying those goals early and first is going to lead to a much more productive conversation. Just as important as setting the goals ahead of time, or maybe even as part of setting those goals ahead of time, we want to think about what has or hasn't worked in the past. Maybe it's what has worked for me in similar conversations, or what has worked or not worked in this specific context with this specific person. How many times have I tried this approach? What exactly am I going to get in response? Give you an example from my life. I have goals when oftentimes I'm negotiating issues with an opposing counsel or an opposing party, and I'm having to have conversations where I disagree with the other side about the facts. I disagree about the law. I disagree about what the resolution is going to be. If I go into that conversation with the goal of convincing the other side that I'm right, we're going to be butting heads. Ultimately, I'm probably going to come across as being somewhat condescending because I'm disagreeing with the person. Maybe I have information they don't have. I'm going to be argumentative. I'm not going to be open to their perspective. And what's going to be their response? Well, they're going to fight back as well because I'm pushing back. I'm asking, cross-examination questions as opposed to really exploring things. If, on the other hand, if I go into the conversation of, hey, tell me about this case. How do you see this case? And then I stop and I listen. Now, all of a sudden, the person I'm talking to is in a different mindset for the conversation. They get to explain their position. I get to listen. I can repeat back to them. I can do some different techniques that we'll be talking about at a later date. And the conversation goes differently. I had 2 different conversations the other day with 2 different attorneys. Well, I would say in both cases, I felt like the other side's position was not supported by the facts. And I also had a suspicion that the other side wasn't really aware of the facts, that they hadn't had the conversations with their clients to get all the details. At least certainly didn't have the details I had. In the first conversation, I was asking a series of questions, and the person I was speaking with felt that they were being cross-examined. They felt that they were the ones on a deposition and that I was coming across condescending. In the second conversation, we had a kind of open conversation. Um, we didn't argue about what the facts were or they weren't. We talked about our perspectives. Each conversation, there was a very different result. And what was the difference? Difference wasn't with the other side. The difference was in how I approached it. That first conversation, I intended consciously or unconsciously to get the other side to understand that they don't have a case. Now, I had that in the second conversation as well, but I had learned from the first conversation that what I did was not effective for my outcome. Ultimately, my goal of the conversations is to try and resolve things. So if I'm going to start the conversation by putting you on the defensive, I'm not working towards resolution. I'm working towards the opposite because you're going to back up into your corner and you're going to put your fists up. What did I do differently in the second conversation? Well, number one, I started off by asking, how are you doing? And surprisingly, he actually told me that he was having a difficult day. And I asked him about that. And we spent a few moments talking about the frustrations of being a lawyer and having sometimes some difficult clients and what that might look like. And so it was kind of just a nice icebreaker. And then I started with, so, tell me about this case. What do you know about it? And he came out of the bag, and he admitted that he really had, he's only got some limited information and he didn't have authority, but he wanted to talk to him and see if there was some possibilities for resolution. So he also set the stage for what he did or didn't know. He wasn't coming in pretending as though he knew something he didn't. And I didn't feel the need to push him on the fact that he didn't have all the facts. The end of the conversation, we didn't resolve things, but he is going to get back to me with some more information and he's going to get back to me with some specific demands, and we're either going to resolve it or we didn't. The first conversation, they also agreed to get more information to me, which is good, but the conversation was much more difficult. I ended up having to use other techniques to regroup and come up with a better way to have that conversation. Had I approached that first conversation with the intention of just listening and stuck with that intention, because I will sometimes start with the intention of, okay, I'm going to listen to this person so they can feel heard without feeling the need to correct them when they're wrong, just trying to listen. When I do that, the conversation tends to go a little bit more smoothly, and then they're in a better position to be receptive to where I'm saying. So I asked my question when I'm doing these self audits, what did I do differently? What could I have done differently? How has this gone in the past, whether it's with this individual or with somebody else? So I can talk about how do I avoid that defensiveness? What can I do to lower that fight or flight that we talked about? And the other person's perspective. Uh, Again, if I'm in a fight or flight or they're in a fight or flight mode, we're going to have ineffective communication. So if I can control my emotions, my responses. I can take that deep breath. I can model the behavior I want, and I can allow the other person to be able to speak their position, and I can listen to them. I'm going to calm down their fight or flight. And then we're going to get to the stage where we're going to actually be able to have an effective communication. So maybe I need to change some different strategies. Maybe let's say I've had a conversation with a coworker, a subordinate, whomever, and they're doing something, and I've told them, look, you can't do this, or you should do this, or can you please do this, or when you do X, this is the impact, and it's not really having the change I want. What is maybe another strategy? Maybe I could send an email. Maybe putting it in writing is a difference. Maybe I've been putting it in writing and I'm not seeing the change. So maybe I need to have the actual verbal conversation. Changing it up, changing my strategies. If I did something in the past and it's not working, don't repeat the same thing. If I've tried the same thing repeatedly and I'm still getting the same response, there's that definition of insanity, expecting something different. Um, if I've given you directions on what I expect and you have not followed through with those, am I just going to say the same thing again? Or maybe I'm going to increase the consequences. Maybe I'm going to express this from a position of what's the need from everybody? What do we need to do? By the way, if you haven't had your coffee this morning, your tea, your water, whatever you decide to imbibe in, enjoy it. Sometimes what I need to change is I need to not respond right away. Oftentimes that need that to respond right away, that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I want to respond. I need to just take that pause, let it sit for 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, maybe just a couple hours. Take that pause, step back, think about what my outcome is going to be, what I want it to be, what do I want my response? Do I need to respond to this? And if so, how do I respond? Taking that breath, taking that moment, taking those couple hours, day, whatever it is, can help. Maybe we even let them know, hey, I got your email. I'm not going to be able to look at it till tomorrow. I'll have a response to you tomorrow. So they're not wondering, did you get a response at all? Back in the day, it was not uncommon. If I sent out a letter, it's going to be 2 weeks before I get any kind of a response. Well, we've trained ourselves now for this instantaneous response. If I send out a query, I'm going to get a response. Now, all this information's at our fingertips and it's instantaneous, and we get the sense that we have to respond right away. But that's in our heads. Rarely is there something that is such an emergency that we need it right away. And oftentimes, if there is that feeling that we need to respond right away, we can take a pause and say, wait a minute, does this really have to happen? And we can realign our expectations and their expectations. Say, look, this is an important thing, and I want to make sure I give it the amount of attention that it deserves. So I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can. What else have we tried in the past? Have we been very clear about our boundaries? Do we need to be more accommodating? Sometimes we can be too rigid in what our expectations are. I told you I needed this and you didn't get it done. That may be appropriate. Other times I might need to, you know what? I need to be a little bit more flexible. Well, we talked last time about an employee who is habitually late. Well, maybe I need to have some flexibility because there's some things that are outside of this employee's control or outside of my control. And if I'm just getting frustrated because I have expectations that aren't going to be met, either I need to change the expectations or they need to change their behavior. Maybe I can change my expectations. Maybe I need to set clear boundaries and just be very specific. That kind of self-audit is going to help you plan for the conversation. So we're setting the goals, we're doing our thing about like our self-audit, what has worked for me in these types of situations or with this particular customer, client, coworker, supervisor, family member, what has worked, what hasn't worked, so that I can come up with a good plan. So let's say you have the conversation. Do an after action report with yourself. Did it go well? If it did, what went well? If it didn't, where did it kind of go off the rails? Where was that first point? Can I think through that conversation so that you can start understanding what actions you did that helped you in the conversation and what things were impediments to the communication? Doing those self audits, thinking back through it, going back that after action report is going to help you be a more effective communicator. And yes, at the beginning, it can be a little bit difficult. Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to pre-plan for the conversation, then I got to have the conversation, and then I got to come back afterwards and think about how did that conversation go. That's a lot of time. You don't have to spend hours and hours on this. It's just taking those few minutes to think back through how did that go? What went well? What didn't? What can I change? And we don't have to put value on it. Oh, I messed up or I did great. It's just what was working, what didn't, so that you can learn from that. So the next time you go through that audit, you've already got that after action report in your brain. Maybe you have those notes. Sometimes it's helpful to debrief with a colleague. That's what I did. I was talking about the 2 conversations I had. I had that first conversation that didn't go as I planned. And then I had a conversation with a colleague and talked to him about this. And my colleague confirmed, yes, Rob, you're coming across as condescending. Kind of already knew that. And we talked about some other alternative ways. And I put those to use in the second conversation. And that second conversation went better. Now, I'm not saying that either conversation, I don't have a resolution to either of those conversations yet because this is an ongoing thing, but I'm talking about building the building blocks, doing the stepping stones to get to the path of resolution and what was working best, what wasn't. So review those emails before you send them out. After, depending on how the response was, look at those emails, see, oh, hey, this worked, this didn't. I oftentimes get copied on client emails who, oh, this is the conversation we've been having. And I can go through it as an independent person, point out, oh, okay, here's where the disconnect is. Here's where that problem is. Oftentimes it's somebody has said something that the other person disagrees with, and they start fighting over that point, and they're losing the battle. So do those self audits. Think about what your goals are ahead of time. Try and plan out what those goals are. Think about it afterwards. What went well, what didn't. We're going to continue on with our conversation next time. We're going to talk about, again, some of that self-evaluation. How do we maintain our equilibrium during these conversations? We're going to talk about, what are some preparation things. We're going to give some specific tasks and items that we can think about and what to do during and after. So thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking with you soon.